My name is Lily Mitchell, 45 years old. I was driving to a family party in Annapolis. My service dress whites pressed sharp, two silver stars gleaming on my shoulders. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, a text from my sister. Don't embarrass the family with that uniform. You're already a failure in their eyes. My grip tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. Failure. I'd led missions that saved lives, commanded ships through storms, earned in those stars with 20 years of sweat and sacrifice. Yet my family saw me as a disappointment, a stain on their perfect social image. I glanced at the uniform hanging in the back, its crisp white fabric a symbol of everything they despised. I wasn't going to hide who I was. Not tonight. At that party, I'd walk in with my head high, stars shining, and when my sister's husband, a Navy officer himself, stood and saluted, calling me Admiral, their world would turn. Have you ever been made to feel small for what makes you proud? Drop your story in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and let's talk about standing tall. I stared at the road ahead, the hum of my car's engine steady, but my mind was already slipping back. 20 years ago, I stood in my dress blues at the Naval Academy graduation, scanning the crowd for my family. My mother and father weren't there. They'd chosen a charity gala over my ceremony, leaving me with a voicemail. Lily, we're proud, but tonight's important for the family image. I was 25, clutching my diploma alone. My sister, 17, then got a convertible for her birthday that week. I got a thrift store dress 2 sizes too big with a note. Wear something feminine next time. I'd laughed it off, but it stung. They saw my uniform as a rebellion, not a career. Years later, deployed on a destroyer in the Pacific, I called home one Christmas Eve. I was 35, commanding my first ship, the weight of 100 sailors' lives on me. I dialed from the bridge, hoping for a moment of warmth. My mother answered, her voice clipped. Lily, we're at a party. Your sister's here, shining as always. I heard laughter in the background, glasses clinking, and my sister's voice, sharp and smug. She's probably barking orders at someone. The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there, the cold metal of the ship's console under my fingers, realizing they'd never see me. Not as a leader, not as a daughter, just as a failure who chose the wrong path. The memories didn't stop there. At a family dinner 5 years ago, my father pulled me aside. Lily, your sister's building a real legacy. Charity board, society pages. You could have done that, not this Navy nonsense. I'd just been promoted to captain, but he didn't ask about it. Instead, he handed me a glass of wine and walked away to toast my sister's latest influencer deal. She'd smirked, her diamond earrings catching the light, and said, "Maybe one day you'll figure out what success looks like." I swallowed my anger, left early, and drove back to base. That night, I pinned my new rank to my uniform, promising myself I'd never let their words define me. Every slight, every dismissal built a wall between us. My mother's texts were always about appearances. Don't mention your job at the gala. My father's calls were about leverage. Can you connect me with someone at the Pentagon? My sister's posts online painted me as the odd one out, the tomboy who never grew up. Yet I kept trying. Sent gifts, called on birthdays, hoping for a crack in their armor. There was none. They wanted me to fit their mold, to trade my stars for their spotlight. I didn't. I couldn't. The worst was 2 years ago at a fundraiser my mother hosted. I'd flown in from Norfolk, still in my service khakis, fresh off a deployment. I'd saved a dozen sailors in a training mishap, earned a commendation. I thought maybe this time they'd see it. I walked in, and my sister rolled her eyes. Lily, you look like a drill sergeant. My mother pulled me aside, whispering, "This isn't the place for that uniform." My father didn't even look up from his conversation with some investor. I left before dessert, my commendation still in my pocket, unmentioned. On the flight back, I stared at the medal and swore I'd stop chasing their approval. Now, driving to this party, those moments burned in my chest. My sister's text, "Don't embarrass the family," was just the latest cut. They'd spent decades trying to erase who I was, to shame me for the stars on my shoulders. But tonight wasn't about their approval, it was about truth. I stepped out of the car, my service dress whites crisp, the 2 silver stars on my shoulders catching the evening light. The Annapolis mansion buzzed with chatter, string lights glowing above the lawn where my parents' 40th anniversary party was in full swing. I straightened my cover, took a breath, and walked toward the entrance. Heads turned. Guests in tailored suits and glittering dresses paused mid-sip, their eyes flicking from my uniform to the medals pinned to my chest. I felt the weight of their stares, but I kept my chin up. This was their world. Society pages, clinking champagne flutes, but I wasn't here to blend in. My sister spotted me first. She stood near the grand staircase, her designer gown shimmering, a glass of wine in hand. Her smile froze, then twisted into a scowl. She marched over, her heels clicking on the marble floor, and stopped inches from me. "Lily, you actually wore that?" she hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to turn. "You're such a failure, embarrassing us like this." Her words cut, sharp and deliberate, echoing across the room. A few guests gasped, others whispered. My jaw tightened, but I held her gaze, refusing to flinch. My mother appeared, her pearl necklace gleaming, her face a mask of forced calm. "Lily, this is a celebration," she said, her voice low but edged with warning. "You're drawing attention for all the wrong reasons." She gestured toward a side table away from the main crowd, as if I were a misbehaving child to be tucked out of sight. My father stood across the room, chatting with a group of investors, his back to me. He didn't even glance over. Typical. They'd spent decades pretending I didn't exist unless it suited them. I handed my sister a small box, a Navy combination badge I'd earned after a rescue mission. "For you," I said, keeping my voice steady. She opened it, glanced at the badge, and tossed it onto a nearby table next to a pile of untouched gift bags. "Cute," she said, smirking. "But this isn't a military parade." A few guests chuckled, their eyes darting between us. My chest burned, but I didn't let it show. I'd faced worse than her mockery. Storms at sea, life or death calls. This was nothing. I moved to the side table my mother had pointed to, where lesser guests were seated, out-of-town cousins, minor business associates. The main tables were reserved for my sister's inner circle, her influencer friends snapping photos for their feeds. I sat, my uniform stark against their sequins, and scanned the room. That's when I caught the eye of my sister's husband, James Larson. He stood near the bar, his Navy lieutenant's posture unmistakable, even in civilian clothes. His gaze lingered on me, not with judgment, but something else. Curiosity, maybe respect. It was fleeting, but it planted a seed of unease. Did he know something? The band struck up a slow tune, and my sister took the microphone, her voice syrupy sweet. "Thank you all for celebrating our parents' 40 years of love," she said, raising her glass. The crowd clapped, but her eyes locked on me, cold and pointed. "Let's honor family tonight, those who actually show up for it." The jab landed hard, a public slap disguised as a toast. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding my gaze, others whispering. My mother nodded approvingly, her smile tight. My father finally looked my way, but only to frown before turning back to his conversation. I gripped the edge of my chair, my knuckles whitening. Every fiber of me wanted to stand, to call out their hypocrisy right then. But I didn't, not yet. I'd learned long ago that timing was everything. Their words, their dismissal, only fueled what was coming. My sister thought she'd humiliated me, that her stage was hers alone. She was wrong. This party wasn't over, and I wasn't the one who'd leave in disgrace. James's glance stayed with me, a puzzle I couldn't yet solve. But soon the truth would unravel. Hers, theirs, all of it. The sting of my sister's words at the party lingered, but it wasn't new. It was just another layer on a wound they'd been carving for years. 3 weeks ago, my father called me, his voice smooth as polished mahogany. "Laylee, we need to talk business," he said. No warmth, no greeting. I was in my office at the naval base, files stacked high, prepping for a briefing on a new weapons contract. I put him on speaker, half expecting another lecture about my wasted career. Instead, he got to the point. "I have a friend, General Paul Whitaker, who needs insight on a Pentagon deal. You're in a position to help. It's for the family." His tone was casual, like he was asking for a favor, not a breach of security. I froze, my pen hovering over a report. "Robert, I can't do that," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You know why." He chuckled, dismissive. "Don't be so rigid, Lily. This could secure our legacy." I hung up, my pulse racing. My father wasn't just asking for a favor, he was pushing me to betray my oath. The weapons contract was classified, tied to a new missile defense system. Leaking details could cost lives, careers, everything I'd built. I stared at the phone, the weight of his words sinking in. He didn't care about my stars, my rank, or the sailors under my command. To him, I was a tool, a means to an end for his real estate empire. I'd seen that look in his eyes before at dinners, where he'd toast my sister's success while ignoring mine. But this was different. This was dangerous. The next day, my mother called. Her voice was softer, laced with that practiced charm she used at her charity galas. "Lily, your father's under pressure," she said. "This deal with Whitaker could save us. You don't want to let the family down, do you?" The guilt trip was textbook, but it hit hard. I remembered her pulling the same card when I was a kid, begging me to skip a school event for one of her fundraisers. I'd refused then, and I refuse now. "Diane, I won't compromise my duty," I told her. She sighed, long and dramatic. "You've always been so selfish, Lily." The line went quiet, but her words echoed, twisting the knife. Then came my sister. Her call came late, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Lily, you're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "Whitaker's a big deal. Help Dad, and maybe we'll finally respect you." I laughed, bitter. "Emily, respect isn't bought with betrayal." She scoffed, her influencer persona cracking. "You're such a failure, Lily. Always playing the hero, but you're nothing to us." She hung up, leaving me staring at my desk, the combination badge I'd planned to give her glinting in the lamplight. I'd thought, foolishly, that it might mean something to her. It didn't. I couldn't shake the unease. My family wasn't just asking for a favor. They were entangled in something bigger. That's when the email came, late at night, from Thomas Reynolds, my trusted officer. I'd served with Thomas for a decade, his loyalty unquestioned since we'd pulled through a storm together on the USS Cole. His message was short, urgent. "Found something on Whitaker. Check your secure inbox." I opened the encrypted file, my heart pounding. It was a financial trail linking my father's real estate firm to Whitaker's private accounts, payment states, and a single line that stopped me cold. Funds tied to failed missile test 2015. Cover-up suspected. The test had gone wrong, injuring sailors, costing lives. Whitaker had buried it, and my father had profited. I leaned back, the pieces falling into place. My family didn't just want a favor, they were complicit. Whitaker had used my father's connections to hide his negligence, and now they needed me to keep the secret buried. My mother's guilt, my sister's taunts, my father's pressure. It was all a coordinated push to pull me into their web. I closed the laptop, my resolve hardening. They thought they could manipulate me, use my rank for their gain. They were wrong. I'd spent years proving my worth to a family that never cared. Now I'd show them what my stars meant, not just to me, but to the sailors who'd trusted me, the ones Whitaker and my father had betrayed. This party would be their reckoning. I slipped away from the side table, the hum of the party fading as I stepped into a quiet hallway. My sister's taunt, failure, still burned, but it was fuel now. I had work to do. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a secure message from Thomas Reynolds. I'd reached out to him an hour ago, right after my mother tried to hide me from the guests. "Meet me at the base 1900 hours. I texted him, my fingers steady, despite the anger coursing through me. Thomas was already on his way, his loyalty as solid as the day we'd navigated a typhoon together. I needed him now, not just for support, but for the truth buried in that 2015 missile test. I found a private corner, the distant clink of champagne glasses barely audible. I dialed Thomas. "Captain Reynolds," I said, keeping my voice low. "What do you have?" His tone was clipped, professional. "Admiral, I've got a report from the test site. Casualties were covered up, and Whitaker's name is all over it. I'm sending it now." My phone pinged, and I opened the file, a detailed log of the failed missile launch, naming General Paul Whitaker as the officer who signed off on the falsified report. 8 sailors injured, 2 died, all swept under the rug to protect a defense contract. My father's firm was listed as a funding source, his signature on a related payment. My stomach churned. They weren't just greedy, they were complicit in betrayal. I needed more. "Thomas, can you get a witness?" I asked. He paused, then said, Charles Donovan, retired captain, was on that project. He's in Annapolis, willing to talk. I'll bring him to the party. Charles Donovan, a name I hadn't heard in years. He'd trained me as a young officer, his integrity unshakable. If anyone could confirm Whitaker's cover-up, it was him. Get him here by 2100, I said. We're ending this tonight. Thomas didn't hesitate. Yes, ma'am. I hung up, my resolve sharpening. The party was about to become a reckoning. As I pocketed my phone, something caught my eye. A glint on the table where my sister had tossed my combination badge. Among the gift bags, a pair of her diamond earrings lay discarded, forgotten. In her rush to humiliate me, I picked them up. The stones cold in my palm. Something felt off. The backing was heavier than it should be, a faint wire protruding. My training kicked in. I slipped into a nearby study, grabbed a letter opener, and pried open the casing. Inside was a tiny device no bigger than a grain of rice, a listening bug. My heart raced. Emily wasn't just mocking me. She was spying, likely for Whitaker. The earrings were a gift from him. I remembered her boasting weeks ago. This wasn't just personal, it was calculated. I called Thomas again. Check for surveillance tech tied to Whitaker, I said. My sister's involved. His voice tightened. On it, Admiral. I'll cross-reference the financial trail. I sent him a photo of the bug. My hands steady, but my mind racing. Emily's role wasn't just manipulation. She was a link in their chain. The bug tied her to Whitaker's scheme, recording conversations that could have included my own classified briefings. I'd been careful, but the betrayal cut deeper than her words at the party. My family wasn't just using me. They were endangering lives. I returned to the hallway, slipping the bug into my pocket. I needed one more piece of evidence, something undeniable to show the guests. I texted Thomas again. Find video from the test site. Anything that shows the failure, he replied instantly. Got a lead on a maintenance crew's footage. It's raw, shows the explosion. Sending to your secure tablet. I checked my tablet, hidden in my car outside. The video loaded, a grainy clip of the missile misfiring, smoke billowing, sailors scrambling. Whitaker's voice barked orders in the background, dismissing the chaos. My father's logo flashed on a crate nearby. It was enough. I glanced at my watch. 8:30 p.m. The party was peaking, my sister's laughter echoing from the main room. Charles would arrive soon, and Thomas was already en route with the files. The bug in my pocket felt like a ticking bomb, proof of my family's deception. I adjusted my uniform, the silver stars heavy on my shoulders. I wasn't the failure here. They'd built their empire on lies, and I'd tear it down with the truth. Tonight, at this party, their masks would fall, and I'd make sure every guest saw it. The band's music faded, and the chatter of the party dulled as the massive screen at the front of the ballroom flickered to life. I stood near the back, my service dress white, stark against the sea of tuxedos and gowns, my heart steady but pounding. It was 9:15 p.m., and Thomas had just arrived, his face taut as he nodded to me from across the room. He'd set up the projector, the video file loaded and ready. My sister was still holding court near the stage, her laughter sharp, oblivious to what was coming. My mother and father stood nearby, clinking glasses with their elite guests, their smiles polished to perfection. They thought this night was theirs. They were about to learn otherwise. Thomas stepped forward, his voice cutting through the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, a moment please. Heads turned, murmurs rippling. My sister's eyes narrowed, sensing something off. Thomas didn't flinch. He clicked a remote, and the screen lit up with grainy footage of the 2015 missile test. Smoke billowed, sailors shouted, and a missile spiraled out of control, exploding in a fiery wreck. The crowd gasped, glasses clattering as they set them down. Whitaker's voice boomed through the speakers, barking orders to secure the site, reported as a success. My father's company logo flashed on a crate, unmistakable. The room froze. I stepped forward, my boots clicking on the marble floor. This is the truth they hid, I said, my voice clear, carrying over the stunned silence. General Paul Whitaker falsified reports. 8 sailors were injured, 2 died, and my father's firm profited from the cover-up. The guests turned, wide-eyed, some clutching their pearls, others whispering furiously. My sister's face drained of color, her wineglass trembling in her hand. My mother's smile vanished, her hand gripping my father's arm. He stood rigid, his jaw clenched, eyes darting to the exits. Then James Larson, my sister's husband, stood from his seat near the bar. His Navy lieutenant's posture was unmistakable, even in a suit. He faced me, his expression unreadable, then raised his hand in a crisp salute. "Admiral," he said, his voice steady, cutting through the tension. The word landed like a grenade. Guests gasped again, their whispers turning to a low roar. My sister's head snapped toward him, her eyes wild. "James, what are you doing?" she hissed, but he didn't look at her. His salute held a silent acknowledgement of my rank, my truth. I nodded back, my chest tight, but my resolve ironclad. Charles Donovan stepped forward next, his weathered face grim. I'd known him as a mentor, a retired captain who'd shaped my early years in the Navy. He didn't need a microphone. His voice carried the weight of decades. "I was there in 2015, he said, pointing at the screen. "Whitaker ordered us to bury the truth. He threatened careers, silenced witnesses, and funneled money to Robert's firm to keep it quiet." He turned to the crowd, his eyes blazing. "Those sailors deserved better. Their families deserve the truth." A woman in the crowd stifled a sob, her husband pulling her close. Others stared at my father, their faces shifting from shock to disgust. The room erupted into chaos. Guests shouted questions, some demanding answers, others edging toward the doors. My sister dropped her glass, red wine splattering her gown like blood. "This is a lie," she screamed, lunging toward the stage. "Lily's making this up." My mother rushed to her side, her voice shrill. "Lily, stop this now," she snapped, her composure shattered. My father pushed through the crowd, his face red, bellowing, "Turn that off." But Thomas stood firm, the video looping, Whitaker's voice damning him again and again. I held up the tiny listening bug I'd found in my sister's earrings, its wire glinting under the chandelier light. "This was in your gift from Whitaker, Emily," I said, my voice cold. "You were spying for him, weren't you?" The crowd turned to her, their murmurs growing hostile. Emily's mouth opened, but no words came. Her eyes darted to my mother, then my father, but they were too busy scrambling to save face. My father grabbed a waiter, demanding the projector be unplugged, but it was too late. The truth was out, and the guests, senators, CEOs, society matrons, were witnesses. I stood tall, my stars gleaming. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was for the sailors who'd suffered, the families who'd been lied to. My sister's insults, my parents' manipulation, they were nothing compared to the lives lost. James lowered his salute, his gaze steady on me, a silent ally in a room of chaos. Charles stepped beside me, his presence a shield. The party was no longer a celebration. It was a battlefield, and I'd just fired the final shot. My family's empire was crumbling, and I wasn't done yet. The ballroom's chaos faded behind the heavy oak door as my mother yanked me into a private study, her grip tight on my arm. The taint of her perfume mixed with the sharp tang of spilled wine from my sister's shattered glass. My father followed, his face a mask of fury, and my sister trailed behind, her eyes red and frantic. James Larson slipped in last, closing the door with a soft click, his expression unreadable but steady. The room was small, lined with bookshelves and a single lamp casting long shadows. The party's hum was a distant murmur now, but the weight of what had just happened, Thomas's video, Charles's accusation, the guests' shock, hung heavy in the air. It was 10:15 p.m., and this confrontation was the final nail. My mother spun on me, her pearl necklace glinting as she jabbed a finger in my face. "Lily, you've ruined us," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you drag our name through the mud?" Her words were venom, but I'd heard them before, every time I'd chosen my duty over their image. I stood tall, my service dress whites crisp, the silver stars on my shoulders, a silent rebuke. "Diane, you ruined yourselves," I said, my voice low but cutting. "You hid the truth about those sailors, and I'm done covering for you." My father stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "You think you're untouchable, Lily," he growled, leaning in close, his breath hot with whiskey. "I can make sure you never work in the Navy again. One call to Whitaker and your career is over." The threat was bold, but it was hollow. Whitaker's name was poison now, exposed to a room full of senators and CEOs. I met his gaze, unflinching. "Robert, your threats don't scare me," I said. "You're the one who's finished." His jaw twitched, his fists clenching, but he didn't speak. He knew I held the upper hand. My sister collapsed into a leather chair, her gown stained, her face crumpling. "Lily, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "We didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. I didn't know about the bug." Her tears were real, but they were too late. I pulled the listening device from my pocket, holding it up. "You wore this, Emily," I said, my tone cold. "You spied for Whitaker, for them, and you called me a failure. Don't play innocent now." She flinched, her hands covering her face, but I felt no pity. She'd chosen her side long ago, basking in their approval while I fought for scraps. James stepped forward, his Navy lieutenant's posture rigid. "Enough," he said, his voice calm but firm. He turned to me, his eyes steady. "Admiral, you did the right thing." The word Admiral hit the room like a shockwave. My sister's head snapped up, her tears forgotten, her mouth open in disbelief. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. My father's face darkened, but he stayed silent. James continued, his voice unwavering. "I've seen the report, Lily. I know what Whitaker did. You're not alone in this. His support was a lifeline, unexpected but solid, like an anchor in a storm." I turned to my family, my decision made. "I'm done with you," I said, my voice steady, each word deliberate. "I've spent my life trying to prove myself to you, but no more. You're not my family. You're a lie." My mother's face twisted, her voice shrill. "Lily, you can't mean that. We're your blood." But her words were empty, a final grasp at control. My father took a step toward me, his voice low and dangerous. "Walk away and you'll regret it," he said. I didn't blink. "I regret ever trying to please you," I shot back. Emily sobbed, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "Don't, Emily. You made your choice." I turned to the door, my boots clicking on the hardwood floor. James followed, his presence a quiet strength at my side. "Lieutenant Larson," I said, glancing at him. "Thank you." He nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "Always, Admiral." The door opened, and the party's noise flooded back. Guests still buzzing, the fallout of the truth spreading like wildfire. I didn't look back. My mother's cries, my father's threats, my sister's pleas. They were echoes of a past I was leaving behind. I'd built my life on honor, not their lies, and I was finally free. 6 weeks had passed since the party, and Annapolis had changed. The crisp November air carried a quiet I hadn't felt in years. My office at the naval base was a sanctuary now, its walls lined with charts and commendations. The weight of my family's betrayal had finally lifted. The fallout from that night had been swift and unrelenting. General Paul Whitaker's arrest made headlines, his face plastered across news channels as military police escorted him from his Virginia estate. The charges were heavy: falsifying reports, endangering lives, and misappropriating funds tied to the 2015 missile test. The evidence Thomas had uncovered, bolstered by Charles Donovan's testimony, left no room for escape. Whitaker's career was over, his legacy a stain. My father's empire crumbled just as fast. His real estate firm, once a cornerstone of Annapolis's elite, filed for bankruptcy within a month. The financial trail linking his company to Whitaker's cover-up had sparked investigations, and investors pulled out overnight. I saw the headlines on my tablet: "Mitchell Properties collapses amid scandal." My father's name, once spoken with reverence, was now a whisper of disgrace. I felt no joy in it, only a hollow relief. My mother's charity galas vanished from the social calendar, her influence gone. My sister's online presence, her carefully curated influencer persona, went silent after a flood of comments called her out for the listening device. I hadn't spoken to any of them since I walked out of that study. They were no longer my family. I leaned back in my chair, the morning light filtering through the blinds. A stack of letters sat on my desk, each one a quiet testament to why I'd fought. The families of the sailors from the 2015 test had written to me, their words raw and heartfelt. One letter from a widow named Clara stood out. "Admiral Mitchell," she wrote, "you gave my husband's sacrifice meaning. We finally know the truth." I read it again, my throat tight. Another letter from a sailor's son thanked me for honoring his father's memory. 8 families had suffered in silence, their pain buried under lies. Now they had closure, and I had purpose. I folded the letters carefully, placing them in a drawer beside my combination badge, the one my sister had tossed aside. The Navy hadn't stayed quiet either. Last week, I'd been called to the base for a ceremony. The command room was packed. Officers in dress whites stood shoulder to shoulder. The base commander, Admiral Hayes, stepped to the podium, his voice steady. "Rear Admiral Liley Mitchell," he said, "your courage in exposing corruption has upheld the Navy's honor." He pinned a Distinguished Service Medal to my uniform, the crowd's applause ringing in my ears. I stood tall, my stars gleaming, but my mind was on the sailors who'd never come home. This wasn't about me. It was for them. James Larson was there in the front row, his nod a quiet echo of his salute at the party. "Well done, Admiral," he said afterward, his grip firm as we shook hands. His support hadn't wavered, a rare constant in a world that had shifted beneath me. I left the ceremony with a clarity I hadn't known before. For years, I'd carried the weight of my family's expectations, their disdain a shadow over every achievement. Now I was free. My office phone buzzed. A message from Thomas. "Case closed. Whitaker's trial starts next month." I smiled faintly, setting the phone down. The truth had won, but it wasn't just about justice. It was about the life I'd built, the one they'd never understood. My sister's taunts, my mother's guilt trips, my father's threats, they were gone, replaced by the respect of my peers and the gratitude of strangers who mattered more. I stood, adjusting my uniform, and looked out the window at the base below. Sailors moved with purpose, their drills precise under the morning sun. I wasn't tied to a family that saw me as a failure. My legacy was here, in the Navy, in the lives I touched by standing for what was right. The letters, the medal, the quiet pride in my chest, they were enough. I was Admiral Liley Mitchell, and I was finally home. The morning sun filtered through my office window at the Naval Academy, casting a warm glow over the charts and medals on my desk. I sat in my service dress whites, the silver stars on my shoulders a reminder of the path I had chosen. The chaos of that party, the accusations, the betrayal, the truth laid bare. It all felt like a lifetime ago. But the lessons I'd learned, the clarity I'd gained, were as sharp as ever. I wasn't just Rear Admiral Liley Mitchell anymore. I was someone who had faced the ugliest truths and come out stronger. And I wanted you, the ones listening to this story, to know what it taught me. Honor isn't just a word in the Navy. It's a code, a promise to stand for what's right, even when it costs you everything. For years, I let my family's expectations define me. My mother's disapproval, my father's demands, my sister's taunts, they were chains I didn't see until they nearly broke me. I fought to prove myself to them, to earn a place in a family that never valued me. But that night, when I exposed their lies, I realized something. Honor isn't about pleasing others. It's about holding yourself to a standard they can't touch. I stood up for the sailors who'd been silenced, for the truth they deserved, and in doing so, I found my own strength. Manipulation is a poison, and it's everywhere, not just in families like mine, but in the world around you. It's the voice that tells you you're not enough, that you need to bow to someone else's agenda to be worthy. My family used it to control me, to keep me small so their empire could shine. They hid behind wealth and status, but it was a house of cards built on lies, and it crumbled when the truth came out. Don't let anyone do that to you. Whether it's a parent, a partner, or a society that demands you conform, recognize the signs. They'll guilt you, shame you, make you doubt your worth. But you are enough. You don't need their approval to live your truth. I think about the sailors' families often, the ones who wrote to me after that night. Their letters still sit in my drawer, a reminder of why I fought. They lost husbands, fathers, sons because of greed and deceit. But they found closure because I refused to stay silent. That's what honor means, to act for those who can't, to fight for what's right, no matter who stands against you. I'm not saying it's easy. It's a battle won that leaves scars, but those scars are proof you chose the harder path, the one worth taking. To everyone watching this, I want you to think about your own battles. What's holding you back? Who's trying to define you? Don't let them. You have the power to break free, to build a life that's yours, not theirs. I learned that the hard way, but I'm stronger for it. And you can be too. If my story resonates with you, share it. Tell me in the comments what you've faced, what you've overcome. Your voice matters, and I want to hear it. Hit that subscribe button, and let's keep this conversation going, because standing tall doesn't mean standing alone. It means standing in truth, even when it shakes the ground beneath you. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk, me in uniform, surrounded by my crew on the deck of the USS Grant. The wind had been wild that day, whipping through our hair, but our smiles were steady. They were my family now. The kind built on loyalty, not blood. The kind who stood beside you, not above you. The phone on my desk buzzed again. A message from Thomas Reynolds. Mission report complete. Whitaker convicted on all counts. 2 life sentences. I exhaled slowly. Justice had been done. The names of those lost sailors would be engraved on the Wall of Honor next month. Their memory finally given the dignity it deserved. I looked out across the base where young recruits were marching in perfect formation under the crisp winter sky, their movements precise, disciplined, but full of promise. I remembered being one of them, eager, determined, naive enough to think honor was just about medals and orders. I knew better now. Honor is about the choices you make when no one's watching, when it costs you something real. The door to my office creaked open. James Larson stood there, still in uniform, a faint smile on his face. "Permission to come in, Admiral?" he said. I nodded. "Always, Lieutenant." He stepped in, handing me a folder. "Thought you'd want to see this. The Academy's inviting you to speak at next month's Leadership Symposium." I raised an eyebrow. "You think they're ready for my version of leadership?" He chuckled softly. "They need it more than they know." I flipped through the folder, an official invitation stamped with the Navy crest. The title read, Integrity in Command, Lessons from the Front Lines. My name beneath it felt surreal. "You'll come, won't you?" I asked. "Wouldn't miss it," he said, his tone steady. "Besides, someone has to make sure the Admiral doesn't cause another scandal." I smirked. No promises. He left with a polite salute, and as the door closed, I leaned back in my chair, the sound of distant drills echoing from the courtyard below. For the first time in decades, I felt peace, not the kind that comes from silence, but from resolution. There were still scars, emotional ones that wouldn't fade overnight, but they were reminders, not burdens. I'd faced betrayal, manipulation, and public humiliation, yet I'd come through with integrity intact. My family's empire was gone, but in its place, something far stronger stood: the truth. Outside, a formation of jets roared across the morning sky, leaving silver trails that caught the sunlight. I stood, watching them fade toward the horizon, feeling that familiar rush of purpose fill my chest. The Navy had taught me many things: discipline, courage, resilience, but the most important was this: you don't need approval to be enough. You only need truth. I straightened my jacket, touched the metal on my chest, and whispered softly to myself, for them. The sailors, the families, the truth-tellers who refused to bow. As I turned off the light and stepped out of my office, the world beyond the window seemed brighter, sharper, alive with possibility. My boots echoed down the corridor, each step certain and unhurried. I wasn't walking away from my past anymore. I was walking toward my future, and for the first time in my life, it was mine.